Welcome to the deep dive. When we think about these huge inventions, like radio, it's easy to picture just one person, one big aha moment. But looking at the sources you shared, the dawn of radio, it's clear the real story is, well, way more complex and honestly pretty fascinating.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we want to do today, sort of peel back those layers.
True.
We need to untangle who did what, separate the pure science from the stuff that made it actually usable, commercially.
Right.
It's definitely not a straight line. It's more like a tapestry, really, woven by lots of different people.
And the name that usually pops up first is Guglielmo Marconi, right?
Yeah.
Italian inventor, late 1890s.
That's the one. Yeah. He gets a lot of credit for the first practical system.
Practical. Okay. And he was involved in that first big transatlantic signal and early commercial stuff.
He absolutely was, but the practical part is key. Marconi was brilliant at engineering a usable system. He wasn't necessarily discovering brand new physics.
Ah, okay. So he built on what others found.
Precisely. He cleverly used things like the coherer detector, improved tuning circuits, stuff that let him send Morse code reliably over pre-long distances.
Gotcha. Turning theory into something people could actually use.
Exactly. Taking potential and making it a tool.
So who laid that theoretical groundwork then? Before you can use radio waves, someone has to, prove they even exist.
Right. And that crucial step, that proof, that was Heinrich Hertz back in 1886.
1886. Wow.
Yeah, he proved electromagnetic waves, what we now call radio waves, were real. He generated them with a spark gap transmitter, detected them with loops, showed they acted like light, just different frequencies.
So that was the foundation. Hertz proves it's possible.
Absolutely fundamental. Without Hertz, there's no wireless communication as we know it.
Okay, so Marconi picks up on Hertz's work. What were his specific steps then to make it, tangible?
Well, building on Hertz, Marconi had a big breakthrough in 1895. He sent a wireless Morse code message over a kilometer.
A kilometer? That's way beyond a lab bench.
Huge leap. And then the very next year, 1896, he patented his system for wireless telegraphy, sending messages without wires. That was the big move towards practical application.
But was he the only one thinking along these lines? It feels like these things often happen in parallel.
You're spot on. He wasn't alone at all. Nikola Tesla, for example.
Oh, Tesla.
Yeah, he was deep into wireless ideas, too. He actually demonstrated a radio transmitter in St. Louis back in 1893.
93, so even before Marconi's big kilometer transmission.
That's right. It really highlights how these ideas were bubbling up in different places, often concurrently. Different people, different approaches, but heading towards a similar goal.
Amazing. So many different threads. And then it took quite a while to go from these point-to-point telegraphy things to radio as we think of it.
It did. That big shift towards public broadcasting. That really happened around 1920 with the first commercial radio broadcasts.
1920. What changed then?
Well, it showed the technology was mature enough. It wasn't just for Morse code or military use or ship to shore anymore. It could be a mass medium, bringing, news and entertainment right into people's homes.
And this wasn't just happening in Italy and the U.S., right? You mentioned a global race earlier.
Absolutely. We have to mention Alexander Popov in Russia.
Popov, okay.
He's credited there with developing a really early, crucial device, a radio wave detector. His work is hugely significant in Russia. They even celebrate it as Radio Day.
So different countries, different key figures. It really underscores that global dimension.
Definitely. Multiple national narratives around the same basic technological push.
And the story doesn't just stop with Marconi or Tesla or Popov getting signals across. The technology kept evolving.
Oh, absolutely. You had people like Reginald Fessenden, who was a pioneer in actually transmitting voice, not just code, moving towards audio broadcasting.
Voice is a whole different ballgame than dots and dashes.
Totally. And then Edwin Armstrong, who came up with frequency modulation FM radio.
Ugh. FM. What was the big deal with FM?
Clarity. Armstrong's FM encodes the sound onto frequency changes, not amplitude changes like AM. That meant much clearer sound, less static, less interference, a huge leap in quality. It just shows the innovation kept going, refining and improving the technology long after the basic concept was proven.
So when you, our listener, think about this, the big takeaway really is radio wasn't one invention.
Not at all.
It's this long chain, right? Science, then engineering, then making it commercial, practical. And it wasn't just one person, but lots of people, often working at the same time at different places.
each adding a vital piece, sometimes building directly, sometimes in parallel, sometimes competing. It's a collective effort, really, spread across decades and continents.
Which really makes you think.
Yeah, it raises a fascinating question, doesn't it? What is an invention, actually? Is it the first person who dreams up the concept, the first to prove it works in a lab?
Or the first patent?
Right, or the patent. Or is it the moment the technology actually becomes, useful and widespread, part of everyday life for millions? Where do you draw that line?
That's definitely something to mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into radio's really tangled, fascinating history. Keep exploring.
Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever wondered what's truly happening when you hear a song or even just someone speaking? You feel that bass drum, right? Or know a voice instantly. It's all this, invisible dance of physics. Today, we're doing a deep dive into sound waves, what they are, but also, the really cool stuff behind how we hear.
Absolutely. And our mission really is to get under the hood, to understand the dynamics, the fundamental properties of sound. It's this physical phenomenon, and we can actually break it down. It shapes so much, and it's not as complex as you might think once you see the mechanics.
Right. So when we talk about sound, we usually think air, sound traveling through air. But is the air itself moving, like from a speaker across the room to my ear? Or is it something else? What is a sound wave at its core?
Yeah, that's a really important point. It's not like when the air isn't flowing across the room. Think of it as a pressure wave. Imagine the air molecules or particles in water, or even a solid table. They get pushed and pulled. As the sound wave moves, these particles just vibrate back and forth right where they are. And this creates these zones, areas where particles bunch up, that's compression, high pressure. And then areas where they spread out, rarefaction, low pressure. It's that pattern, the compression and rarefaction that travel.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Pressure waves moving through stuff. But what starts it? What actually gets this vibration going? How does my guitar string making a sound actually happen?
Well, it always starts with something vibrating. Always. Could be a speaker cone pushing air back and forth. Could be your vocal cords buzzing. Even a tuning fork, That initial movement disturbs the medium right next to it, the air, the water, whatever.
Yeah.
And that disturbance travels outwards as those compressions and rarefactions we talked about. And here's the key thing. Sound waves are longitudinal waves.
Longitudinal. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
It means the particles vibrate back and forth in the same direction the wave is traveling. Think about pushing a slinky along the floor. The coils bunch up and spread out along the length of the slinky, right? The wave moves forward and the coils move forward and back. That's different from, say, a wave on water, where the water goes up and down, perpendicular to the wave's direction. This longitudinal motion is how sound carries energy without actually moving the air itself across the room.
Got it. So vibration creates the wave travels as pressure changes, and the particles move along the wave's path. But then what makes sounds different? Why does a flute sound high and a tuba sound low? Or, why is a whisper quiet and a shout loud?
Now we're getting into the key properties. There are three main ones. First up is amplitude. Amplitude is basically how big those pressure changes are, how much push and pull. A bigger amplitude, more intense pressure changes means more energy. And that's loudness.
So turning up the volume is just making bigger amplitude waves.
Exactly, more push. Then there's frequency. Frequency is about how often those compressions and rarefactions pass by a certain point per second, measured in hertz or hertz. And that determines the pitch. Higher frequency, higher pitch, like a piccolo. Lower frequency, lower pitch, like that tuba or a deep bass note.
Okay, amplitude, loudness, frequency, pitch, makes sense.
And it's frequency where our own hearing limits come in. Humans, typically we hear sounds between about 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. Anything lower than 20 hertz, like some earthquake rumbles or elephant calls, that's infrasound. We might feel it, but we don't hear it as pitch. And anything above 20,000 hertz, that's ultrasound, like dog whistles or bat navigation sounds, totally outside our range.
Wow. So there's this whole world of sound happening that we're just deaf to. That's kind of wild. And the third property you mentioned, speed.
Right, speed. And this one's interesting because it's not fixed. The speed of sound depends entirely on what it's traveling through the medium. Things like the medium's temperature and density really matter. For instance, sound travels way faster in water than in air, almost 5 times faster.
5 times? Seriously?
Yeah. It's why whales can communicate over huge distances underwater. Or why, if you're swimming, you might hear a boat engine from really far away. And it's even faster in solids. Put your ear on a metal rail. You'll hear a train coming through the rail long before you hear it through the air. So these waves are literally everywhere. Your voice in the air, those whale songs underwater, even the vibrations from a speaker shaking the floor.
This has been fascinating. So we've covered sound waves as these pressure waves started by vibrations. We know they travel longitudinally, and their character comes down to amplitude for loudness, frequency for pitch, and speed depending on the medium, plus our own hearing limits.
Exactly. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Just think about it. All the information, the music, the conversations, the warnings, everything we get from sound comes from these completely invisible pressure waves moving through the world. And then consider all the sound we don't hear, the infrasound, the ultrasound. There's this whole other layer of physical reality, of energy and information constantly around us, just beyond our senses. It really makes you appreciate the richness of the unseen world, doesn't it?
Today, we're looking into something that's been around forever but is really changing fast. Radio. We've got a bunch of sources here, and we're going to figure out how radio is actually adapting, in this whole digital world.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The core idea seems to be that radio isn't dying out. Not at all.
Right.
It's evolving, becoming this blend of the old school broadcast and new digital stuff.
Adapting to tech and how we listen, basically.
Exactly. So the mission today is to see how it stays relevant, how it actually thrives.
Okay, so first up, this idea of digital integration keeps coming up. What are we actually talking about there? What does it mean for, someone listening?
Well, a big part of it is digital radio tech, like DAB, digital audio broadcasting.
Right.
It means more stations usually, much clearer sound, definitely. And sometimes you get extra bits like text or images popping up on your radio display.
So definitely a step up from just AM or FM static.
Oh, yeah. And that digital side opens things up for more interaction, more personalized listening.
Which ties into these evolving formats the sources mention, like podcasts and streaming.
Precisely. Online radio, podcasts, streaming services, they're booming. They give you, the listener, so much more choice and flexibility.
Right. You listen when you want to, not just when it's podcast.
Exactly. More control in your hands.
And what about how we actually get to the radio? Smart speakers seem huge here. Alexa, Google Assistant.
Yeah, they're a massive factor. Our sources really highlight them. They make accessing radio just incredibly easy.
Super convenient.
Totally.
Yeah.
Just asking your speaker to play a station, that removes a lot of friction.
Feels like a real game changer for access.
It is. And that easy access fuels this other trend, content diversification.
Meaning radio isn't just music and talk anymore.
Right. Stations are now expected to offer way more. Think podcasts produced by the station, on-demand audio clips, maybe even interactive features.
Catering to lots of different interests.
And interestingly, even with all this new tech, community radio still gets mentioned as really important.
For local stuff.
Yeah, providing that hyper-local news, shows for specific community groups, things bigger platforms might miss. It keeps that local connection strong.
Okay, that makes sense. But with all these changes, offering more, how do they pay for it all? Let's talk monetization.
The big question. How do they keep the lights on?
Yeah. What are the strategies now? Is it just ads like always?
Well, traditional ads are still there, but it needs to adapt. The sources point towards more targeted advertising, ads based more on the listener.
More relevant, maybe less annoying.
Hopefully. Plus, things like sponsorships, maybe a specific show or segment gets sponsored, and even potentially subscriptions for exclusive or ad-free content.
So a mix of approaches moving beyond just the old ad breaks.
Yeah, it has to be more sophisticated, more tuned into the audience.
So wrapping this up then, radio's future really seems to depend on one thing.
Its ability to adapt.
Exactly. Adapting to new tech, adapting to how we change our listening habits.
Yeah, that's the core message. Despite all the competition, radio isn't vanishing. It's expected to evolve, stay relevant for news, for entertainment.
But it has to embrace digital. That seems key.
Absolutely. Embrace digital platforms, offer diverse content. That's the path forward according to everything we've looked at.
So thinking about all this change, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How might you, listening right now, find yourself using radio or audio content in totally new ways in the coming years? Something to think about.